that's really what we focus. That's what I focused on in building RTA, the Road to
Mm,
Awe.
right.
Um,
And how would you compare both what the brand was then to what it is now, but also the person that you were there, or maybe the manager or founder that you were then versus the leader that you are today? What do you think have been the biggest differences?
I mean, when I started, there was no resources. It was just like trying to figure out whichever way to get things done. Um, I had to really focus on every part of building a fashion company. Um, I mean, I still do today, but instead of having, individuals taking care of things with your oversight, it was you figuring out every part of the part of the way, from sampling, ordering fabric, development, relationships with laundries, cutting and sewing, um,
Yeah,
all
marketing,
that.
sales, everything.
Sales, how are you going to get this out? What is the strategy? I'm a nobody. How am I going to get this out to the world? And at the time, ecom wasn't really what it is today. It was all through wholesale channels.
Right.
Um, Marketing, so we didn't have social wasn't a thing till I feel like mid 2015, 16. That's when it started. So
Mm,
um, was more old fashioned, through press, through publications, through the
yep.
fashion weeks, um, getting into the right stores. Um, and so that I had to figure all that out. Um, and so sampling, sales, production, how are you going to produce this? Um, Through what channels, where, what's the most efficient way? And then finance too, finance, cash flow, how to get things paid for, um, how to learn, how to use a factor, um, and credit terms, and build all that. And then your systems too, how do you get out POs, and how do you account for inventory in the right way, and raw materials, and it's a whole complex web.
Of
uh,
course.
but I feel like when I started, it was much more. It was easier to figure things out because it was you're
One
handling
problem
everything,
at a time. Yeah, and there
one
was
problem
one
at a
thing
time.
straight on. Yeah.
And I always knew, and I mean, there always is a mountain of things to figure out and a mountain of problems, but it's one problem at a time.
Right. Yes. Which one's staring me in the face right now? Let's figure that one first, and then the others will come
Yeah,
later and take that one's position.
yeah, because you have problems, and within a specific problem, there's could be micro problems that you
Of
also have to figure out. So
course.
um, I feel like where I am today, back to your question, I am much more knowledgeable in how things work. I know what not to do. I've made a lot of mistakes along the way. Um, and um, it's always a fine push and pull between creative endeavors and actual business, and having something that works. Um, and that's something I fight with constantly on a day-to-day basis.
And when you say fight, do you think the reason for that fight is because you sort of like haven't figured out your identity within those two principles, or because realistically there's nobody in the business who literally take care of one or the other?
I think, well, for no, the identity I have, but it's more of I if I like something creatively, will that make the most business sense to put out?
Of course.
Uh, and is it worthwhile investing your time in this creative endeavor? Will it just fulfill me inside, but
Mm,
will it at what cost?
right.
Uh, or will the world understand what I believe in, and will they buy into it?
Right.
Will it get out there in the right way?
Mm,
And there's always an insecurity that will I always have. It's like, will this work, and or will this not will this just will be a flop, or
right.
will this actually stick? And and hit.
Hmm.
But you only know if you try. And you know, it's you can't you can only use so much knowledge and feedback, but you have to try,
Hmm.
and that's where you learn.
Course. And over the amount of mistakes and setbacks you've experienced in your career so far, is there anyone or any single one in specific that maybe has still some emotional effect to this day, some lingering trauma?
Um, for sure, there's plenty I could pick up on. One that comes to mind is um, a uh, a decision I made with Barney's at the time before they closed down. You know, I had a bunch of goods to ship. It was a whole new collection that we worked so hard to produce. Um, we knew there was credit issues. Um, and in hindsight, you know, we ended up shipping a whole collection to them because we wanted it to be out and on terms without a prepayment. And and they ended up filing for bankruptcy a
Wow.
month or so after, and I lost a lot of money from that gut instinct to say, you know, everything's going to be okay. They're going to pay us, and we
Yeah,
had
it's Barney's.
affirmation from their buyers that
Yeah.
that would work out, and it didn't end up working out, and you know that was a loss. So that's one example. That's a setback, and you learn from those mistakes. And you know, the for me that the urge to have something out there and represented was right away and hit before, I mean, hit on time, because you know the fashion cycle is so it's so have to be on time, otherwise you hit the markdown season and you don't get enough time for sell through. Um, if you know, so for me, it's like, okay, I should have used better judgment um, in terms of the situation that was happening.
Hmm. Interesting.
Um,
And in terms of developing that better judgment, what do you think was the biggest change you had to experience as an individual to start making those decisions? Because I understand mistakes are there's a lot of specific mistakes that make you learn about specific scenarios, but the biggest mistakes usually come from a misjudgment of character, which is most closely related with maybe your personal identity with the business or with yourself. So is there that's sort of like the biggest piece of the puzzle that I'm trying to understand of who was David 10, 30, 13 years ago to who is David now? Was David more of a romanticizing creative with dreams and visions, but no specific or technical business know how to make them a reality, or no accountability to make right decisions, versus the David who is the David now, you know?
um, the David before was naive and had, you know, a business background from coming from a finance school and from a family in the industry. But like I said, I mean, I've made so many. I've gone through so much the past 12 years of running RTA that um, I feel like I'm at a level now where I won't be repeating a lot of the mistakes I made, and I I've found out a lot of things along the way, and I'm still finding a lot of things out. But uh, there's several things I could say about what I feel I've learned. Um, I feel most confident in about myself right now, and especially running a brand. That caters to both men's and women's dual gender. It's not just very specific, you know, item that we focus on here. It's more of creating a full lifestyle for both demographics. And there's so many um, nuances about not just creating, you know, I'm not just doing a footwear or one item like a denim that's just repeating and that's all my business. It's the whole look. It's the whole. There's so many complexities in just all categories that that I create. And then also running a wholesale a retail operation, international business as well, and direct to consumer online. Those are all businesses within themselves
Of course.
that you have to focus on each one of them.
Hmm.
But I think the main thing is always focus, always keep your foundation strong. Um, don't flutter uh, to other ideas without having a strong foundation that keeps everything that it keeps the heartbeat pumping. And that's something that I've learned throughout the years that is always true in running being an entrepreneur and running your own business.
And what are those foundations for you?
The foundations for me is focus on what works and what your customers are telling you. Don't if you have something that's working, don't veer away from it. You can add on top of it, but don't veer away from it.
And when you're thinking about a customer, you mean the person that is actually buying the product, not the retailer
Correct.
or the buyer that's buying the product. Because I think that's also a major mistake that especially creatives make. That they start compromising their decision making, thinking about the customer and thinking about the retailer instead of thinking of the person that actually buys and wears their clothing.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of has shifted since post-COVID about that, because the way it used to be pre-COVID is we're putting out what we feel is our identity and our look and how we feel it's the best represented. Post-COVID, it's much more riskier, and people are much people and sort of consumers and wholesalers are much less inclined to take a risk on new ideas and new endeavors without having the full marketing power or capital behind that.